John Cordy, and this morning I actually connected an Ethernet cable from this room down to the wireless router. It's wireless, but I prefer to go wired because that's just the type of guy I am, obviously. If you're new to the channel, you might not know, but I'm a Helix type person and also modelling type person. So, you know, like Fractal, FM3, Kemper, HX Stomp, all of this stuff is very much what I like to use in my wheelhouse, particularly when I'm at home recording. The amps are obviously a nice thing to have, but predominantly I use those for live and also for having fun. I got a 9.6 Pod Go about this time last week because there was quite a good deal, and I've been playing around with it for a week and I really like it. This video is sort of exploring whether Line 6 have created a product which is going to kick the Helix out of a lot of people's homes or not, which I guess is not what they intended to do, but I'm imagining there's quite a chunk of Helix users that don't necessarily use all of the parallel paths and stuff, and sort of more casual users that potentially are going to think, well, I don't need this when I could use a Pod Go. The first thing that I wanted to check out was whether the sounds of the devices are actually the same. So the company line and what you'll hear a lot of people saying is that the sounds are identical. My feeling at the moment is that I'm not sure whether they are. So I just wanted to, I've recreated a patch that I've got on the Line 6 Pod Go, which I was recording with this morning. I've recreated that in the Helix, and I just wanted to see whether things were indeed the same or whether there's a slight difference in tone. So that was a fairly unscientific attempt to ascertain whether there's a difference in tone between the two, so I'll let you be the judge of that. In general, to see that there's a device this size and a device the size of the Pod Go, let me just grab it actually, see the discrepancy in size and components and stuff. If you're a believer that lots of things affect tone, wouldn't it effectively be impossible that things would sound and feel exactly the same when the devices are quite different? That's just a tiny point. I don't think there's a massive difference in tone between the two, if there is a difference at all. Now, I'm no expert on digital modelling or signal chains or signal processing and all that stuff, but I think it would probably be impossible to get two devices which have presumably quite different internal circuits and quite different components for inputs and outputs. I'm going to assume that that'd be quite difficult to get those to match exactly. Having said that, they're probably close enough that it doesn't really matter. Why might you want a full Helix if you could get a Pod Go for, what is it, a third of the price maybe? Or certainly half. So this is the preset that I created on Pod Go, adjusted for Helix, and I think it sounds pretty good. So it's based on a derailed Ingrid which is a train wreck. But I basically just set up a clean and a lead, and I can do that with the Pod Go, and I can have the wah and all that stuff which I used earlier on this morning. Sorry, just had a delivery. So, as I say, you could set it up to have clean and things sound pretty good, I think, across the board on the Pod Go and on the Helix. So if you're a fairly basic user and you're generally going to be using a delay, a chorus or reverb, that sort of stuff, and an amp model, I think the Pod Go will get you there most of the way. You're going to potentially have to make a few compromises, which is something that I've read people that are maybe, slightly surprised that they can't just put whatever they want in the free blocks. I guess some of the delays and stuff must use quite a lot of processing power, so you'll probably have to make some compromises. You can't just put all of the blocks on at once and expect to have all of your first choices, is basically what I've found. Same with the Helix, to be fair. Across that signal chain, if you wanted to use some of the really kind of DSP intensive blocks, once you get past about 6 to 8 blocks on one signal path, you start to run into some of those DSP issues. So if you're just a one signal path guy, then I think you'll be okay with the HX Stomp, you'd be okay with the Pod Go. You wouldn't necessarily need what the Helix has to offer. But just to demonstrate why you might consider the Helix, here's the similar sort of sound, but I've also set up an additional signal path running the Fullerton Jump model, which is one of my preferred Fender models, and I guess you can just listen. Although one of my basic signal paths is the same as the Pod Go, essentially, I'm able to set an additional signal path, and that's kind of providing an additional complexity to the sound. Something I really like to do with clean tones, if you pair kind of two different styles of amps. So I've got the train wreck, which is like an AC30 style, I think, and the Fender Fullerton for a bit more of a mid-heavy. And not only that, I can also then pair, I've got the Elephant Man, so a Memory Man delay on one path, and then on the other I've got a Cosmos Echo, which is more of a tape delay, I think, like an Echoplex style. And so you get an additional kind of so that's another reason that the Helix potentially might be something you might want to check out. You can run vastly more complex signal chains, and that is kind of where you can get some of that interesting where you can get some of those kind of interesting Strymon-y style sounds, and perhaps more record ready produced sounds. if that's what you're looking for. And then one other thing that is apparently going to occur with the Helix is that it's going to get more regular updates than the Pod Go. And so things like this is called the Rochester comp, which isn't yet available on the Pod Go, if it ever does become available. So those are some of the things that I use on the Helix, which I quite like being able to do. So, being able to have parallel delays and parallel reverbs, and also parallel amps with different signal paths, signal chains. That's something that I really like to experiment with on the Helix, and it's stuff that I can't really do particularly easily in the real world. I guess I'd have to have an AB kind of setup, a 2 amp setup, as well as kind of multiple pedal boards or signal routing within those pedal boards, stuff that I can't really achieve. And so it's kind of nice to be able to go into the Helix world and kind of pull out these so that's what I find inspiring still about the Helix. It's not necessarily that I'd use all of these sounds on a gig. It's not necessarily that I'd need to have all of this capability all the time. But when it comes to sitting down and trying to be creative with just a guitar and create kind of cool washy tones and stuff, I still feel like the Helix does kind of hit it out of the park on that. Whereas the Pod Go, yes, I can do certain stuff, or the HX Stomp to an extent, but in terms of these elaborate kind of signal chains, I can't do both of those things. So those are my thoughts on that, and why the Helix potentially is something that's going to stick around in my life for a while longer. Having 2 fully independent signal paths is kind of unique, I think, to the Helix at this stage. So that's kind of cool. If you want to leave in the comments whether you thought the devices sounded the same or whether you heard a difference, that would be cool. I'm going to check it out now and see if I can hear a difference and whether it even matters anyway. But the presets will be in the description if you wanted to check them out, the Helix ones and the Pod Go ones. And hopefully this was vaguely useful if you're thinking about, well, have Line 6 just done themselves out of a job, by bringing out the Pod Go? Does it do everything the Helix can? Not really. But does it do a significant chunk of it that would probably make a huge chunk of consumers happy? I'm kind of imagining so. So yeah, let me know your thoughts. Hopefully this was vaguely useful, and if it was, if you could like and subscribe, leave a comment your thoughts. And thanks for stopping by. Cheers.